Hello, everyone. Second. There we go. I'm Kristen Rose. I will be the moderator today, and you are attending Strategies for Managing Organizational Change. Your presenters today will be Bill Davis, Marty McCullough, and Charlie Minnick from Ashford University. And so I will now hand it off to them.
Great, Kristen, thank you. As she said, my name is Charlie Minnick. So myself and my colleagues today, we're going to talk a bit about strategies for managing organizational change. And anyone who's lived through 2020 at this point knows that change is everywhere, and it can happen a little bit at a time. It can happen quickly. So we're going to look at different types of change and how we try to effectively manage change and manage, implement, and keep sustainable change as well too. So that's what we're going to try to accomplish today. So a purpose, if we go back one there, so a purpose a little bit. So we're going to we'll examine how many change forces in our world have impacted how we do things. I mean, it's things like government, politics, economics, technology, social culture, natural, human-related forces are constant. We're in the middle of, again, this pandemic. We're in the middle of an election cycle. So I think there could be lots of possible changes coming down the road for us. We'll introduce different types of change, how we effectively manage, implement, and again, sustain change. We'll look how teams develop, how important communication is in the change process. We'll offer up a couple of final thoughts, and we even have a kind of a special gift for everybody at the end. So that's what we're going to try to accomplish. We're always good stewards of time. I think anybody who's went to class before knows class has to start at and on time. So we'll give our presentation, and then we'll have some time at the end for folks to ask questions as we go along. So there's my presenters. I'll introduce myself, and I'll let my two colleagues give their 30-second speech about themselves. So my name is Charlie Minnick. So I'm President Emeritus and lead faculty in our MBA program. I've been at Ashford almost 15 years. So I've had different roles, have managed lots and lots of change. And really, I'm just really fortunate, I think, to have worked with some really, really great people along the way who have given me opportunities to do a lot of different and cool things. So Bill, why don't you talk a bit about yourself?
Sure, I'll be good. I'll be brief, and I'll be gone. And what I wanted to say is just simply that I love what I do. I'm a lead faculty in the Forbes School of Business Technology. I have been in higher education for 15 years. Back when Ashford started, I was an adjunct. It was an avocation. I still had my career, and I went full time. I loved it so much in 2009. So I've been around for about 15 years and impacting lives. And prior to that, I was in the PepsiCo system and 3 decades there. So I really love the transition into higher ed. And the one thing I want to say that I absolutely love about my colleagues is that our commitment and dedication to furthering student success and student learning, because we all share the belief that there's no greater calling in life than to make a positive difference in the lives of others. So thank you for all being here. Marty?
Yeah, my name is Marty McCullough. I'm actually not with the Forbes School of Business. I teach in the undergraduate and graduate criminal justice programs. I spent about 10 years as both a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney. Was my practice after law school. And then I decided I actually wanted to get to know my children because trial work's pretty demanding. So I was blessed enough to be able to transition into education. And I helped the University of Phoenix launch its criminal justice program in 2001. I helped another school launch its program. And then like Bill, I've been around since 2005 with Ashford. I helped create the original criminal justice undergraduate program we had. And I've been teaching here ever since. I was the first lead faculty for the criminal justice program in 2006 to 9, I think it was. And then I've been teaching here ever since, and love the place. And like Bill said, everything's student focused in what we do. And it's great to be able to collaborate across colleges on these kind of things. And that's how great these two guys are, that they bring in somebody that's not in the business world to come and talk about this stuff and learn along with them. So it's been a real blessing and a lot of fun.
Thank you. Charlie, back to you.
Okay. So we'll talk a little bit again about change management. I think this is very representative of these little blocks. You measure, plan, strategy, improve, execute, engage. But what's in the middle of it all is change management. I think, like I said, like I talked earlier, there's lots of ways that things change. Government changes, politics. Look at COVID-19, for example. It changed how we do everything in our life. It changed how we do work. It changes where we work, kind of changes when we work, changes how we go out to eat, how we work, how we play, how we interact. So that was just change on a dime, because this, again, our world just got really turned upside down, and we're still in the middle of it. And I think we're still trying to figure out how do we manage all these moving pieces with COVID as it's happened, and how it's changed our world. So it's an ongoing process. So, but change is tough. Change is tough. So I think organizations are always in this constant state of readiness, are constantly planning, improvising, implementing their strategies and plans in response to these change forces. There's action learning and dealing with change force in the present. They're experiencing endless change continuums. And Bill will talk a little bit in a bit about change in some of the continuums. And it's every place in our organization. Change happens sometimes at the real micro level within your own little team, and then it can impact at maybe your department, then it goes to the large organization. So change occurs at every level throughout the organization. I read somewhere if you're through changing, you're really through. So change it, and I think we have to think about change in a good light. Sometimes we think, oh, we got to change because something bad happened. Well, maybe if we think about change as a continuous improvement process, always, trying to get better, trying to improve what we're doing, as opposed to trying to change when something bad happens, might help us kind of embrace change a little bit better, I think. So, and we'll talk some about effective group structures. I think that's important in change. I think you gotta get the right people at the right time doing the right task, who are moving things forward, who are really committed to the process. So I think that's change management is tough, but we'll talk a lot about that, how we try to, again, how do you implement, manage, and sustain long-term change. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Bill, who's going to talk a bit about the types of change that we encounter, some change continuums, and how do we manage change. Bill, it's up to you.
Thank you, Charlie. The thing that I want to say is I've learned about change, in my corporate career and here in education, is that there are continuums. And sometimes I'm going to show you the types of change in the next slide. But some changes happen fast. Some are just more fine tuning. They're more developmental. So what ends up happening is, it kind of looks like the top here. You're at the current state. It's easy to change. So you change it. You change a little process or procedure. You fine tune. You tweak it, and all of a sudden you've got it going that way. But sometimes there's more that involve departments. They're more transitional type changes, and they're more maybe transformational type changes where the organization is transforming and changing. So sometimes, it's not as much a straight line going upward as there's an adjustment period in the transition state. But being flexible and adaptable and kind of looking at it from the concept of a change continuum. That's how I learned it. And the word dynamic, something's always moving. It's in a state of change. So in a highly dynamic organization, it's not uncommon to have several types of changes being made all at once, and many change continuums going on at the same time. It could be a major organizational change as well as departmental changes, changes in the classroom, changes in maybe how you coach a student. But change is a part of life, as Charlie said, and Marty said, there's change forces that are pressing on us to make adjustments, be flexible, be adaptable. So it's important to create the right changes and just manage the change process so you get a good outcome. Leadership impacts that, leadership influences that. And hopefully we arrive at, and we learn from the processes and stuff too, but we arrive at meaningful, impactful results, so there we go. So what does a change continuum look like? Here you go. Here's two that I've carried with me my whole career. And, so when I consult, I say, well, you got a trigger event, the organization had to change. And so now you kind of hone in and you see what is really changing. But once you understand it, it's a little bit easier to deal with, in my opinion. Here's the three types of changes. I think this is very interesting to reflect on. I told you these are just the basic types of changes that organizational change theory, a lot of quality management books, they all have these three concepts. Developmental change, and I talked about that, it's fine tuning. Let's change maybe how we deliver the conference perhaps, and let's shift to this method or that process or use this tool. That might just be some fine tuning that creates more efficiency and effectiveness. Or let's do a little larger scale change with departments and do more incremental adjustments. Or perhaps let's do a bigger transformational change, maybe where there's a merger or something that the whole organization is changing. It's more larger scale. So it's important to remember those things. And, and as you move forward, Charlie had mentioned this, that the 4 traits of organizational learning, he said constant readiness. And I have embraced this for a long time, this concept. For organizational learning, you need constant readiness. You got to be ready for change. You're always continuously planning, and then you're always doing improvised implementation, and you're doing action learning. You're adjusting as things change. The types of changes organizations make depend on their forecast, what they see in the future, what they make of the present in the future situations. You heard that theme going across as my colleagues have spoke. And again, just important to remember these 3 types of change. Now, the last slide that I'll cover before I turn this over to my colleague Marty, I wanted to just say that one of the ways to deal with successful change. Now, I put this group of students in here because I thought it was just a good, diverse group of students, and we're all skilled different ways, but we had a little fun. And I was actually subbing one of the courses for Charlie on the Iowa campus at the time, and we did a little group photo to tell Charlie, hey, we can change, and we adapted, because I was teaching one of his organizational change courses. And so he was gone for the evening, and when he came back, I said to him, I think they had a good change experience with me coming in, and it was more just fine tuning, putting me in the classroom, but it was a successful evening. And I told the students, let's take a thumbs up photo. And I had a little fun. I even photoshopped Chuck Norris in there on the right to see if anybody catch it. And but they had good. Morale was good. But now here's my point. Groups and teams during change processes, change times, when you've got that kind of cohesion and focus and people are teaming up, that helps you manage change successfully. But you need to select the right people for the work groups. Then you need to make use of their synergy, the combined energy. And those employees will deliver eventually. They'll go through some stages that Marty's going to talk about, but they'll deliver. And the group will produce more or better outputs than if individuals are working separately. Managers should build autonomous groups composed of complementary skills and knowledge. For example, when groups and teams are utilized to complete special projects and implement needed change, employees get to improve their own skill sets. We learn from each other. They foster their creativity. They improve in their communication, their problem solving, their leadership. Plus, the one thing that happens when groups work together is trust and respect develops. And it leads to what they call positive interdependence and so forth. So, team-oriented leadership raises trust and involvement. And it helps all the team members participate. Again, the acronym for team, together everybody achieves more. But a group can be defined as 2 or more people that interact and they meet certain needs, goals. But when a team of group members works intensely with each other to improve a specific goal, objective, process, more good outcomes emerge, more meaningful results emerge. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Marty McAuliffe.
Great. And so as we talk about positive interdependence and teamwork, we actually are talking about groups. And so basically, if we look at how groups form, I think we've all heard of Tuckman's 5 stages of development, which is the next slide. And before we actually talk about Tuckman's 5 stages, we kind of left out a step because anytime you're going to have a large transformational change or even, a small change and you're being, let's say, compelled to be put into a group to work out on new change, I think individually we all go through, before the 5 stages of group development, we go through the 7 stages of grief. where we're in shock and denial. We have pain and guilt entering into the process individually, anger and bargaining. Do we really have to do this? Depression. But then things get better. We have the upward turn, reconstruction, and acceptance and hope. So just that's meant lightheartedly, but I know quite often if we end up in a new group, we do go through those stages. And when we look at the 5 stages, and we can have that, yeah, there we go. Basically, these stages will form pretty much in sequence. And, at the beginning, you're trying to figure out who everybody is in the group and how you're going to use your strengths and assets and kind of concerned about where your weaknesses are and trying to find out from other folks how they can, fill in your gaps, so to speak. When we get to storming, basically we're starting to develop a group dynamic. We're getting together to, actually tackle the problem rather than worrying about, specifically, what's my role, that kind of thing. We kind of start abandoning ourselves a little bit and start looking to the group and how we're going to function. Norming, actually, the parallel works reminds me, if you're a fan of the TV show Cheers, Norm would walk into the bar and the group of people would all yell, "Norm!" And norming actually is when members accept being in the group and they adopt procedures and behaviors and then they're shaped. So you look at Norm and Cheers, and basically the dynamic of the group was everybody would yell his name when he walked into the bar because he was accepted as part of the group. Of course, the movie probably didn't have much change because, pretty much everybody just sat on a bar stool for a decade. But, hopefully the analogy doesn't have to be drawn too far. Then we finally get to the performing stage, which is really where everything happens, where we have the positive work group together and the concept of interdependence. And so we have positive interdependence that it forms there, which we'll talk about on the next slide. But just as a definition and a foundation, interdependence is a state of mutual dependence in which others influence and are influenced by our thoughts, feelings, actions, outcomes, and experiences. So basically, the individual isn't lost in the group, but the group actually kind of forms its own personality, forms its own dynamic, and that's when you're hitting stride as a group. Everybody feels that they're a part of it. They feel that their voices are important and they're a part of the process. And then, the very end of it ends up with adjourning when the group is over. And then, in all honesty, if the group is successful and you've accomplished your goals, we actually go back to the 7 stages of grief. Because when you're in a dynamic group and you're getting things done, you're actually really sad that it's over. And you wish you could form that group again and continue on going. And then we can go to the next slide again. So for positive interdependence, we're really at the highest functioning of the group. And it's a good way to define it, again, a little bit more than just interdependence itself, as an element of cooperative and collaborative actions. And the focus on the word actions. Sometimes when you get into groups, you can end up in a situation where, you've got too many generals and no foot soldiers. Everybody wants to direct other people to do things, and things don't get done. So if we get to the stage of positive interdependence, then everybody is actually cooperative and collaborating in their actions, where the members share common goals and perceive that working together is individually and collectively beneficial for all members of the group. So basically, no one's left behind. Everybody feels like they're contributing, and you have positive workforces. So as we look at change and group change, through developmental, transitional, and transformational processes like Bill brought up, any one of those 3 stages are going to lead the group in through these stages as well, and to try to get to a high functioning location. And my advice to everybody is, as we are continually going through changes, as Charlie pointed out, COVID and just, technology makes us change every 6 months, it seems, and retool to what we're doing. I encourage everybody to pay attention to the group process and the group dynamic itself. Don't lose your third person perspective of what's going on within the group. Sometimes it's easy to get our tunnel vision and just say, okay, I've been tasked in the group to do this little piece of it. I'm one of 5 or 7, whatever the number is. And that's what I do. I don't really have anything to contribute to the greater group. That's really a bad position for the group, because, we all learn and we all create better collectively than we do individually. So pay attention to that process with a bit of a third person perspective and be ready to jump in and help others. Like I said at the start of this, Charlie and Bill are both accomplished business people, and, business is what they teach, but they bring me in. And I get to learn from them, which is really exciting for me. I get to learn new things that are outside my field of study necessarily. So think about that as you go through groups. And as long as you're conscious of what's going on and you know what the ultimate goal is, we can manage any change. Don't let change and the fear and maybe even the the grief stages, immobilize you. As long as we're taking action, we're moving forward. So I'll turn it back over to Bill and final thoughts.
Well, I was going to let you do this, Marty, but I'll say something about this. My two colleagues, Marty and Charlie here, we're friends and colleagues, and we have worked together for a long time. We've done a lot of presentations together. We work in groups effectively, and we just we're at that positive interdependence stage, where we can step back and kind of see what people will do or might be thinking, and we have good dialogue, and that whole chemistry and synergy just came together. And it came together in the form of an ebook here where we all collaborated on this and put this book together, and it's free for you. And here's a link, and matter of fact, we'll put this in the chat or send it out, through ADEIL, so you have it. But basically, it's just a combination of articles. Now, Marty talks about sitting back as a third party and seeing the whole bigger picture, and not just looking at it like this. But this particular title, I'll show you how this emerged. This particular title for this book was some advice that my friend Marty gave me when we were in San Diego driving to the commencement. He said, "How are things going?" I said, "Pretty good." He said, "Bill, stay engaged. It's essential." I never forgot that little term, and it was kind of like a little focal point for me. So when we were putting this book together, Marty said, "We need a title." Marty and Charlie said, "Well, how about staying engaged is essential?" So anyway, we put this together. We collaborated on some leadership articles. There are some articles that are leading and during times of change. You might like them. They're just short articles, and we think you'll enjoy that. So with that said, we are going to give it back to Dr. Charlie Minnick.
All right, thanks. So I think so there was your free gift that we promised you at the front end. So Christmas in October, I guess. So anyway, so I want to talk a bit about communication. I mean, we could talk for hours, but we'll keep it concise. We talk about NACE competencies, which are competencies that employers think feel important for graduates of school to have when they come out. And so there's 8 of them here, but we're going to focus on kind of the communication one. And I think there's a couple pieces that's highlighted here that are really important, I think, and we look at it from a leadership management standpoint when it comes about communication and change. The ability to articulate thoughts and ideas clearly and effectively of written or forms to person inside and outside the organization, and that the person is able to express ideas to others. I think that those are 2 critical pieces that are essential when we look at change. So, okay, we move to the next slide there, Bo. Okay, so I think about a couple things when it comes to good communication and so you have to excuse my double negative, but in leadership stuff, you cannot not communicate, okay? Everything you say and do or don't say or don't do communicates value to the people, okay? Because especially if things are changing, the worst thing a leader can do is not communicate with folks updates. Even if it's kind of the same update message, it's important to do something, because we've all heard of the old grapevine. I'm a believer in you can't stop the grapevine, but you can certainly manage it. And the way you manage, I think, a grapevine is to put as much good information as you can into the pipeline. That way people are, okay, here's what's going on, as opposed to people trying to come up with 800 different versions of what they think is going on. So, because perception is important there. So, and I have to tell you, so I think there was a story one time, I was teaching a class and we were talking about change. A young man spoke up. He goes, here's what happened in my organization that was really quite disastrous. So they're going through this big organizational change. And this man was this student was kind of at the employee level. Then he had a manager and then a supervisor. So there was 3-4 levels up. So he would come, he goes, yeah, we're going through this big change at work. But his manager told him, he goes, you know what? I don't think it's a good idea, but my boss does, so I think we should do it. Holy mackerel. That's not going to end well. How are you going to effectively get change down the pipeline when your manager is saying, yeah, I'm just doing it because somebody's telling me to do it. I think it's a bad idea. That's going to be troubling. Because I think 3 things can happen in this scenario. People can commit, they can comply, they can resist. Of course, the more important and larger the change, you want people to be committed, they buy in, they're going to move forward, and they really think this is a great idea. I think when people comply, I think about when my kids take out the garbage. when they were all living at home. I didn't really care if they were committed to taking out the garbage. I just wanted them to comply, taking the garbage out, because it made life easier for everybody. You didn't have to commit, just comply at that point. And part of the reason they complied is they wanted me to quit yelling at them, or then I got yelled at. So it's kind of, so we just had them just commit to the process. People do it because, okay, I'm going to do it because I don't want some sort of punishment, or I just want to remain employed. Or people can resist going, you know what? I'm not doing this. This is the 850,000 chain we've been through. I'm done. So they can just resist. So I think it's commit, comply, resist, I think is what happens when people go through that process. So I think if you look at increased efficiency and new technology skills, again, I think none of us is as smart as all of us. I think Warren Bennis talked about that in his management sort of talk. I think that if you want to get increased efficiency in new technology tools, I think the greatest thing you can do as a leader is allow your people to ask questions, and to you ask questions of other people. I told my sons a long time ago when they were getting into the work world, you know what? You can question authority while still respecting it. And I think that's how you ask good questions. It's questions about how it impacts the organization, how it impacts us. Because I think as a leader, the last thing you want to do is get to the end and go, boy, I wish we'd have thought of that. Well, if you get people involved in the process, you're going to go lots of ideas. And I found out a lot of times it's the best idea if you look like an organizational pyramid sort of thing. Some of the very best ideas come from towards the bottom down here because A, they're frontline people. They have to deal with it every day. And there's more people down there. So I think really engage people throughout your organization, but let them know it's okay to ask questions and they can challenge authority while still respecting, I think is important too. So I think improve products and improve quality of products and services again. If you tap into people, let people give the ability to ask questions, you're naturally going to have a better product at the end. Because if you think, as different leadership positions I have, some days I don't have all the answers. I don't even have all the questions. So I got to make sure I tap into people who have different perspectives and insights than I do, because I don't have all the answers or the questions some days. So, and I think it talks about increased responsiveness to customers. I think first of all, to do that, you have to listen to people. My dad told me a long time ago, there's a reason you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. It's more important to listen than it is to talk. So I think feedback is a gift. And a feedback is something that we need to hear sometimes, but that we don't always want to hear sometimes. Sometimes we don't want to hear things are going really bad, but sometimes we really need to hear things are going really bad, so we can right the ship and get moving in the right direction. So, and more innovation through communication. Again, none of us is as smart as all of us. I think there's great ideas. You heard by managing by walking around, all that kind of stuff. Go and talk to people. What are people thinking? Have focus groups. Have people do surveys. So I think there's lots of ways to get more innovative through communication, but you got to get lots of ideas, lots of thoughts into the process. There's no dumb ideas. Brainstorming sessions are cool. You just think through stuff, and then great ideas, once they get churning, lots of good things can happen. So communication is important. I guess my thought is overall is none of us is as smart as all of us. So let's get people involved, and it helps with buy-in, I think, throughout the process too. So, okay, next slide. There's some references. Anytime you do stuff, of course, you got to give credit where credit's due. So there's just some of the references that we've used. So again, if we go back, I think just thank you for your time and attention. And I think we'll kind of go back around one more time to see if my colleagues have any last thoughts or parting shots or things they want to add to the conversation. So Bill, how about you? You want to go first?
Yeah. I just want to say a couple things. And there's 2 experiences that ring out in my mind when I was teaching. One is a student, we're teaching theory, concepts, organizational process, groups. And she said to me, and she had a pretty high position in operations. And she said, doesn't it all boil down to how you communicate? If you communicate well, and a lot of elements are part of communication: empathy, understanding people, listening. But if you communicate well, good outcomes happen. And then we talked a little bit about leadership, and we talked about leaders influence positive outcomes. They positively influence people, but eventually those outcomes lead to results that are meaningful for the organization, for the person, and so forth. But communication is a vital component there. And then the final thought I have on communication is something I was born and raised with, I guess, you know, in the soft drink environment, you know, PepsiCo, 7-Up. We always used to say, communicate, don't procrastinate. You know, so make sure that if you want to communicate, and there's all different forms on how to communicate, whether that's email, phone, whatever. But if you feel like you need to communicate, don't save it, contribute it to the group, you know, an idea, especially if you're in a brainstorm, you know, don't hold back, speak up. You know, Roosevelt Moss Canner says, show up, speak up, look up, and team up. You know, look up to your core values and what you see, but perform and go out there and really, you know, team up and make something good happen for your organization, because that can help organizational change, that can streamline things. But it's all about that right communication that inspires, motivates, influences. So that's all I wanted to say. Communicate, don't procrastinate, and just be a good quality communicator. So Marty, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, my final thought, and this will touch on a couple of the questions in the chat, although not comprehensively. My big thing is whenever we're dealing with, you know, change, if we're getting a group together to change, particularly since that was my focus for this, there's something that either needs to help us advance or something's broken and we need to fix it. And I think as an organization, and it's one of the things I love about being here at Ashford, and for the last 15 years I've seen, is you attack the issue, not the individual. If you're in a group where there's, you know, a section of something that needs to improve, I'll make something up, like let's say there's a technology issue. You don't say you technology folks aren't addressing what we need to address. You say, okay, the issue is we've got a technology issue with Waypoint, let's say, which is a function that we have at Ashford University that is a grading system for us to use, that standardizes grading and kind of gives us content focused reviews of papers. You don't say, you know, you folks need to fix this. It's, we have the issue of, let's say something's not lining up point-wise. You know, I'm just making it up as I go, but that's the important thing. And that's part of the empathy that Bill talked about. I think we need to always realize that we all have to row in the same direction, even when there's challenges. And that's something I think we do with Ashford University very well. And I hope all organizations see it that way, because, you know, if you got people going off in different directions, then no one succeeds.
Yeah, I think I saw something in the chat real quick about like change burnout. Holy mackerel. Yeah, change du jour. Holy mackerel, you get tired. And I think from a leadership standpoint, you have to acknowledge that exists. I know we've been changing a lot. First, we've had to change directions a little bit. I know this is hard. I know we've had a lot of change. And try to, I think, involve people. Here's why it's evolved so much, I think. But yeah, it's hard with change, but I think you have to get people, like we've had with Ashford with our change we're going on. I think Dr. Swenson's done a nice job about making sure that we stay focused on what matters. And that's how do we best serve our students. I think we stayed focused on, through all these changes, we have to control what we can control at the faculty level. And that's how do we impact our students to make sure they have a great positive experience, and we positively impact our personal, professional, and academic lives. So I think we have to, that's how I've tried to deal with the myriad of changes over, you know, the 30 plus years I've been in higher ed, is that sort of stuff, is stay focused on what we can control. This is what matters. And we need to, I think in a certain amount, we have to try to trust that the process, and I know that's hard sometimes, but that's how I try to deal with change burnout. You have to acknowledge that it's real and that it's there. You can't go just sweeping under the rug, because that's not helpful. That's going to make it worse. So you have to acknowledge it and try to keep people focused on what matters and what they can control. I guess that's how I try to do that, because change burnout's everywhere. Yeah,
and you know, Charlie, I think when you communicate too, you know, mutual respect, you know, for each other, and understanding people's situations and so forth, and just functioning properly, because you know, so much of this is about empathy. So much is, you know, good leaders understand the context and the culture and the situation they lead in. in making those adjustments as a team and being unified, lining up with the organization's mission, strategies, culture, goals, for the greater good, and that's all I've tried to do when I communicate, is to see the big picture and go out there and see how people can fit. Now, it doesn't always line up that way, but as a team member, you're trying to help the entire team, and you're trying to communicate in such a way. And what Marty brought up with the Tuckman stages and the development, if you're sensitive to those dynamics, you'll kind of know where you're at in the group. You'll know if it's working well or not. You'll know if people are relating well. But soft skills matter. Ingratiation, positive. Having a pulse on where the organization's at. That's where that whole change continuum is. So when you see stuff might not be going totally right in a group or a company or whatever, realize you're in a continuum. And brace yourself that continuum could be long, could be a year and a half, could be 6 months. I mean, we've all been there. But it's all kind of how you manage change, how you flex to it, flexibility, adaptability. And I think that's so key, style flex, and how you understand. And I'll conclude with this. I remember attending a graduation where Dr. Stephen Perry on the Iowa campus left the graduates with this, and this is burned in my brain. I remember this. His final advice was pretty succinct, and what he communicated was this: always say please and thank you. Never overestimate your intelligence, and never underestimate the intelligence of others. And to Marty's point, everybody has something to bring to the team, to the group, to the company. And his final advice was to the students: pay it forward. Be leaders, improve others, inspire others, influence. Work for the greater good, help people. And those moments in time, they come and they go, but there's opportunity sometimes to lift people, lead and lift them, to equip them, to nurture them in their transformation. Just be leaders during these change continuum, and just keep being curious and figuring out maybe how you can improve. But those group dynamics that Marty presented on Tuckman stages and positive interdependence, oh boy, I think if you can get to that state, you got some good rhythm and efficiency and effectiveness. So that's my final thoughts.
Yeah, I got one more thought too. We're in the field of education, which means we expect our students to change and learn as they go through the process. And we have that same responsibility. Times change, information changes. We can always learn something new, which is the thing I love about teaching. Is I get more out of my classes from my students' perspectives than they get from me. I'm very confident of that. So, anytime we get frustrated or we feel like we're burned out with change, that's kind of the business we've chosen. It's the dynamic of what makes education important, and it's how we improve society moving forward. So, I think we just need to get to the point of embracing change, and just say, what's the next vanguard? What's the next step, and how do we learn? And that's, to me, that's the excitement of education.